Hi, I'm Marty Nimko. This is a short story from the next edition of my book, Soloists, which now contains 234 short stories of introverts and outsiders facing a dilemma. This one is called Disinformation. This monorail, the monster rail, the world's largest, is the culmination of a decade of effort, and yes, money, to move people out of their cars and into mass transit. Oh, I'm supposed to say just transit. Monster Rail will be a beacon, leading the world to a greener, cleaner future. The audience erupted, at least in part because the mayor's advance team recruited her passionate supporters, and because the CEOs and spouses of the Monster Rail suppliers and contractors were invited, down to the CEO of American Bolt, David Lee, and his wife, Amelia. The media was, as well, on board, but rampant accusations of media bias precluded their applauding, especially when the cameras were rolling. The mayor cut the ribbon, and the dignitaries boarded Monster Rail. It climbed the 172 feet so it provides a view of the city and the ocean. Amelia said to her husband, "David, it's so quiet." David smiled. "It's all because of our Bolt's quality." He laughed. They both laughed. As Monster Rail rounded the first curve, they heard a crack. Then another, and suddenly Monster Rail rolled over, and before anyone had time to scream, it crashed to the ground, 172 feet. Now there was screaming and wailing. David had given Amelia the window seat, and that turned out to be her undoing. The impact smashed the window and thrust Amelia's head out, and when Monster Rail then rolled over, it crushed her head. The joint report from the National Transportation Safety Board, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, the Federal Highway Administration, the Federal Railroad Administration, and the Federal Transit Administration determined the cause. Inferior Chinese bolts, used rusted bolts that were supposed to be used only for non-load-bearing applications, such as to hold up railroad ties in residential backyard staircases. The sole supplier of the bolts? American Bolt. The report read, American Bolt's proposal made clear it would use top-tier German or Japanese-made titanium bolts. Those used were grossly inferior, used, often rusted, steel that was well-plated to look new. Pending trial, David Lee was released on $3 million bail. The media loved it. Anti-corporate? Perfect. The story remained on the front page for a week. David had tried to visit the crash site, but the guards refused to let him visit the site of an investigation. So he took pictures using a telephoto lens, which confirmed that the bolts indeed were assured to break. David thought, we would never sell such bolts, even for a backyard. How the hell did it happen? David talked with the warehouse manager and all the warehouse workers. None of them could understand how it happened. The only person he hadn't talked with was the night watchman. 11 p.m., when the watchman's shift began, David showed up. The watchman looked surprised and scared. So David pushed. How did those bolts get into our warehouse? Tell me! And the night watchman did. A guy wearing an American Bolt badge said he was there to replace the bolts that were meant for Monster Rail with higher quality ones. I was skeptical, so he showed me a sample, and it was really shiny. It looked great. Still, I was going to say no and tell him to come back tomorrow. But he said it had to be ready to ship first thing in the morning, and he would give me $100 for my trouble. So I said okay. David went to the media, but none of them ran with the story. They assumed that David was doing a PR campaign to defend himself and to bias potential jurors. It would be all over the newspapers. A few media outlets did a quick investigation but dropped the story, except for one small newspaper, the New York Sun, which was at the brink of going bankrupt. Its editor authorized a Hail Mary and gave much of his remaining money to a young, aggressive, let-the-chips-fall journalist to find out the truth. And she did. The Russian government had wanted defective Chinese bolts to be used in the high visibility monster rail so that when it crashed, future projects would more likely go to the struggling Russian steel industry, despite the boost the industry had gotten from the Ukraine war. So, the Russians sent an operative wearing overalls and a phony American Bolt employee badge in a truck emblazoned with a phony American Bolt sign that was full of those dangerous bolts. The Department of Justice was reluctant to drop the charges against David and American Bolt's other executives. It would embarrass the DOJ. But when the major media finally picked up the story that was in the Sun, the DOJ dropped the charges. David Lee spent much of the next month at his wife's grave. In any case, that story is called Disinformation. In any event, I welcome your thumbs up and accept your thumbs down. I always look forward to your comments and especially like it if you hit the share button below. Share on your social media so that my efforts can have broader impact. And I would welcome your taking a look at my book, Soloists, that's available on Amazon. And in any event, thanks again for watching. I'm Marty Nemko.